Toiru, toiru agdohi Yishu, ischaneni.
So first of all, I apologize for putting on this show. It's not as bad as it looks. It looks much worse than it is. Baruch Hashem, I feel well. I just have this bad cough, which I think is more of some kind of an allergy. So I came back from Chutzlaritz with this cough. And Kodesh Baruch Hu should take it away. He gives, He takes. Everything is b'yad Hashem. So I understand this is the last shiur we have this month. And not many Talmidim in the Bismedish right now. It was a pleasure to come every Erev Shabbos and to share Divrei Torah. In Parshas Bolok, we have no mitzvahs, but we have an interesting sugya. Tzaar balachayim diuraisa. If you check all the Moinei mitzvahs, and who knows how many Sifra mitzvahs are there? How many Rishonim wrote Tzvarim to define which are the Taryag mitzvahs Shebetoira? So two of them, B'tkufes HaGoinim, and that is Rav Yehudai Goen, Baal Halochos Gedolos, and Rav Sadia Goen. And then, three Balei HaTosfos. Who knows which are the three Sifrei Mitzvahs of Balei HaTosfos? The Smag, the Moshe Mekutzi, the Smak, the Yankov Mikurbel, and the Yereim, the Belazar Memetz. And then the Rambam and the Ramban. And Maasef L'Kol HaMachnos, the last to come along is the Tashbitz and Sefer Zohar Harokiya. None of them counts Tzaar balachayim, neither in the list of mitzvahs to say, nor in the list of mitzvahs lo ta'aseh. So is there anything that's min haTorah? And what is it? Neither an asay or a lo ta'aseh. So this is one of the examples I bring many times in my shiurim when I say, Rashi brings, when Moshe Rabbeinu teaches Klal Yisrael, and suddenly he tells them, you know, from now on we're going to have Taryag mitzvahs, they were shocked and taken aback. And they said, we were used to 7. So, you know, sometimes it's reasonable to go from 7 to 10 to 15 to 20. 3 times 7 is 21, 4 times 7 is 28, but this is quite a leap from 7 to 613. And they said, Mi yochal lamoid b'kol eila. So tanuach da'atchem. It's not 613, it's far more than 613. That's not the entire package. The package is much bigger. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches us what He wants and what He expects of us in many ways. Beyond, above and beyond the Taryag mitzvahs. Ratzoin Hashem. And this is a topic I discussed many, many times, and also in Minchas Osher Chumash Devorim, I don't remember which siman. Tzaar balachayim is a beautiful example. Tzaar balachayim diuraisa. No one counts it in the list of Taryag. Doesn't belong in the Taryag mitzvahs. Rotzoin Hashem. How do we know Rotzoin Hashem? The Vilna Shas, in Masechet Brochus, in the beginning of the Masechta, they printed Agdoma of Rabbeinu Nissim Goin. And Rabbeinu Nissim Goin writes, there are mitzvahs that are not written anywhere. They are written Aluach liboy shalodom, uvnese de liba, and these mitzvahs are binding to every human being, Jew or Gentile. Kach kosev Rabbeinu Nissim Goin. עופר ואיפר אני תחס רגלוב, של כל אחד מן האחרונים, קל וחומר הראשונים, קל וחומר בן בנוי של קל וחומר הגאונים. And I think this is totally unacceptable to rely on the collective feeling of humanity, what's right and what's wrong. If Rabbeinu Nissan Gaon would live in our day and age, I don't think he would write that. Because the fundamental ethical values of modern human beings are 100% detrimental, and they go against the Yesodus Adas and Yesodus HaKedusha of Torah Seinu HaGedoshah. So I say, Ratzon HaTorah must be manifested b'Torah. And a Jew needs to do nothing or believe in nothing unless it has a source in Torah's Moshe Rabbeinu. So Ratzon Hashem, or in other words, Ratzon HaTorah, needs to be reflected in Torah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches us his values, either what we learn from Taryag Mitzvahs, even though they're not mamish included in the Taryag Mitzvahs, but the Taryag Mitzvahs teach us ethical values, or from Sipurei Dvorim in Torah, not necessarily mitzvahs. Tzaar Balei Chaim is a perfect example. Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa. How do we know? We start off with the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. So the Rambam was the greatest teacher of his time, and maybe the greatest teacher of all times. The Rambam was the first to codify Kol HaTorah Kulo, and that's the Mishnah Torah. All the Taryag Mitzvahs, all the halachas, everything a Jew needs to know and do is in Mishnah Torah. Shelo k'divrei HaTur, that focused only on what's noeg b'zman hazeh, the Rambam, the entire package of Torah Hashem. The Rambam was the greatest Jewish philosopher of all times, the Moreh Nevuchim. He wrote a commentary on all the Shisha Sidra Mishnah. Chelik Gimel Moreh Nevuchim is all about Tamei Mitzvahs. Let's start off with the first paragraph. Masha Amru Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa min HaPosuk asher Omar Almo Hekisu Es HaSoinchu Ze Sholosh Regolim V'yomer Olav Malach Hashem Almo Hekisu Es HaSoinchu Ze Sholosh Regolim. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a Malach min HaShamayim to be Mochiach Bilam, why did you hit the mule 3 times? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about donkeys. Otherwise, why would he send a Malach min HaShamayim 1,000,000 miles from far away? The Malach comes to reprimand, to b'mechiach Bilam. Why did he hit this animal? Why does this animal deserve to be pained? It is from here that we learn Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa. So the Rambam writes, it's not from a mitzvah. Madua Hekisu Es HaSoinchu, Alma Hekisu Es HaSoinchu is not a mitzvah say, it's not a mitzvah lotas, it's a story. From the story we learn a din. Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa. Rashi, on the other hand, Rashi is source number 3. We count from top bottom. Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa shenemar ozav tazevimoi v'ikemande dorishtam edaklom mishum Tzaar Balei Chaim be'elo metzias. According to Rashi, we learn Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa from a mitzvah say, the mitzvah of prika. If you see a person has an animal, a donkey, so both the Rambam and Rashi learn Tzaar Balei Chaim from a donkey. Not the same one, different one. According to the Rambam, it's the Osin of Bilam and the Malach min HaShamayim. Rashi writes, Ki sir shor ochicho oicha moiroi roivitz tachas masoi ozev tazavimoi. We need to help another person take the burden off the back of an animal. It's from here that we learn Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa. So according to Rashi, we learn an ethical value from a mitzvah, according to the Rambam, from a story. But Kuli Alma Moedim, Tzaar Balei Chaim D'Oraisa must have a makor in Torah's Moshe. Shuvas HaRashba, an interesting one. She'altu memeni. Given the ifsike hilchas at Tzaar Balei Chaim and Torah, my tam ezokum v'yene leficha voidoi lamo ene poirek mishim Tzaar Balei Chaim. So what does it have to do with Zokaven Lefi Chavoidoi? Zokaven Lefi Chavoidoi is put on Shuvas Aveda, because the Shuvas Aveda is all about monetary laws. But why would a Zokaven Lefi Chavoidoi be put of Prika if Prika is not only doing a chesed with a person, but caring for an animal? Tzaar Balei Diuraisa v'oid. Ech pusek Rambam, emoy Balei Behema holach v'yoshev yom aloi zeh shepogo bo yolech o mitzvah harei ze poter shenemar imai. The Rambam paskins, if a person has an animal with a huge bundle on its back, and the owner of the animal buys a coffee, and he says, you know, you have a mitzvah of Tzaar. Would you take the stuff off my donkey's back? He's potter, because the pasuk says Ozav Tzaar Imoy with him. But if he doesn't care, neither do you. What about Tzaar Balei? Tshuva. Shalo echad asher shalto teretz Ramban esed dekvayde Torah odav. Kosav olavaranda lo michvar. Zokav lav davka shekona chachma reyodin lemechubad. So this is a machlokes rishonim. Zokav Lefi Chavoidoi. Is it only Kvoide Torah, Talmud Chochem, or any person it's below his status, you know? So this is a machlokes Daran and the Ramban. So the Rashba's approach is Tzaar Balei Diuraisa, but the Torah is Mati at Tzaar Balei for the needs of human beings. And that's why we're not vegetarians. The Torah is Matir Achilas Bosa. Akrovas Korbonos always involves Tzaar Balei. But if there's a need, whether in Ruchnius or in Gashmius, that overrides Tzaar Balei. So Kvoida Odom is not less than eating a steak. And that overrides Tzaar Balei. Shittim Kebetzes Laflamid Beis quotes a Ravid. Sixth line, the Ravid deals with the question, how do we know Tzaar Balei? Where's the source? Ve'efshar de nafkale mechasima. The lav of lo tachsam shor bedishay. Why is the Torah makbid when an animal is working in the field? Let him eat. Mishum Tzaar Balei. So according to Rashi, we learn Tzaar Balei from a mitzvah sasei. According to the Ravid, we learn Tzaar Balei from a mitzvah lo taseh. According to the Rambam, we learn Tzaar Balei from a story, neither from a mitzvah say or a mitzvah lo taseh. I just bring these sources to prove. Everybody agrees, if a person takes a big stick and he hits a dog, he's not over on the lav of lo yisachsem shor bedishay. Ein shor, ein dayish, ein chasima. But it is from lo yisachsem that we learn that the Torah cares about the feelings of an animal. And the same, when he hits that dog, he's not over on lo yisachsem ozav tazav imoy. But it is from ozav tazav that we learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares. And according to the Rambam, B'chlal, it's from a story. So, when the Chinuch explains the mitzvah of Oisoi v'yes benoi lo yiseh shchatu b'yor me'achod, Sefer HaChinuch Reish Tzadik Daled, כמו כן שהוא לקבוע בנפשנו מידס החם לו ולהרחיק מידס ומחזוריה שמיד הרוע לכן אף על פי שהיטר לנו הוא אל מיני בלחיים למחיוסנו. We could check the animals to eat. ציוונו לבעל נהרג אויסה ויסבנוי ביחד ולקבוע בנפשנו מידס החם לו מטעם מידס הזוי נמצא בלחיים עושה מן התוירו. Now he's explaining the mitzvah of Shalach Teshalach Esuem. And the second paragraph, Kol Chacham Leiv, Yikech Musa Shaloi Lamano Yishnei Anoshim Liyoylem Bedover Men Advorim Shiur Choikem Betivom Imishtunim Banagosam Shemekpida Torah Tzaar Shesh Balei Chaim Shene Bnei Seichel Kol Shom Yodam. Here, he explains the mitzvah of Lo Tachlish B'Shor V'Chamo Yachdov, because two different animals have a different pace. And if you tie them together, that's going to pain them. You know, to put two mules together, two oxen together, but don't put the mule and an ox in the same yoke because they're different. They're different way of walking. So according to the chinuch, there are two other mitzvahs from which might be the source of Tzaar Balei Chaim Diuraisa. And halacha l'maisa, how does Tzaar Balei Chaim manifest itself? Called, writes the Ramon Siman Hey, and this is a very interesting Ramon. Called dover hatzorach l'refuah, or l'shah dvorim, ein behem Tzaar Balei Chaim. ולכן מותר למרוט נויצס מאבוס איסחייס ולקל המחש משם צער בעלי חיים. מכל מקום או אוילם למנועם דהבי אכזוריוס. Once people believed if you pluck out the feathers of a goose, it's a sgula l'refuah. So we're not dealing with little feathers. Big birds on their wings have very big feathers. The ones that we use to make a kulmus for ksivas sefer Torah. And that is extreme pain. So the Rama says, well, fundamentally, the needs of man override Tzaar Balei Chaim. But you do need to take into account, is this so important? And if it's extremely painful to an animal, it is something that shouldn't be done. So let me say something. I might prefer to be off record. I wait impatiently, desperately for somebody to start producing synthetic streimlach. I don't think there's a justification to kill 50 animals to produce a hat. Doesn't make sense to me. So the normal streimel, you need to kill 50 animals and cut off their tails. Does it make sense to kill 50 animals for a hat? At the end of the day, a streimel is a hat. A heilige hat. A holy hat. So the Baal Shem Tov wore a streimel. We assume so. We don't have any photographs of the Baal Shem Tov. But for hundreds of years, yeah, Chassidim have been wearing streimel. The new streimel is in no way like the old ones. You know, I have pictures from my chasana, and I was a chassan, I wore a streimel today. Nobody would wear such an awful streimel as a chassan wore 50 years ago. So, I have some old pictures of my great Rebbe. And his streimel is lopsided, hanging down from both sides. So things change. So to produce a modern streimel, about between 30 and 50 animals, tails, it depends how much you pay for it. For $20,000, you could get a streimel with 100 tails. Depends how much you pay. What's wrong with the synthetic streimel? I think it should cost about $500, and that will be overpaid for a synthetic streimel. So it's not happening. Maybe it would be a good investment. I'm not sure. I don't think Chassidim will ever change. So the Rama writes, it might be a sgula, tearing out noitzes of avazim, but he writes, it's exorius. It's too much. There's a limit. Many Rishonim write that shchita menatzaver is to minimize the pain of an animal. So there are different approaches in Tamei HaMitzvahs. The Rambam is on one extreme end of the spectrum, and the Mekabolam on the other end of the spectrum. Tamei HaMitzvahs of the Rambam usually are very practical. Sefer HaChinuch explains two mitzvahs, midas harachmanos. The Mekabolam have a totally different approach to Tamei HaMitzvahs. Everything has to do with spheres and Yeridas HaShefa. The Rambam was number one in encouraging Tamei HaMitzvahs. Tshuvas Rashba Chelek Aleph Tzadik Dalet comes out against this. The Rashba writes, it's not for us Bechlal to deal with Tamei HaMitzvahs. Rashba quotes a medrash that appears twice in Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Lech Lecho and Parshas Shmini. Ma ichpes loy lakodesh Baruch Hu bein shoichet men hatzav le shoichet men haoiref. Loy nitnu ha-mitzvahs elo letzar ha-fesabriers. Chazal say, does it matter to HaKadosh Baruch Hu whether you're shecht from this side or from that side? What's the difference? Loy nitnu ha-mitzvahs elo letzar ha-fesabriers. Gzeira, you're an eved, you serve, you don't need to understand, do what you're told to do. That's the approach of the Rashba based on the Medrash. The Rambam also brings the Medrash, and he writes different opinions in Chazal. We maintain Ra'ui Lidrish Tamei HaMitzvahs. The Rambam also writes in Moy Nevuchim Chelek Gimel, Kol hanoisen tam beproti HaMitzvahs einoi elo mishtagea shegoen godol. How does that fit in with the Rambam's approach? The entire Chelek Gimel is Tamei HaMitzvahs. The dogish is Kol hanoisen tam leproti HaMitzvahs. The Rambam says we could understand the fundamental ideas, but not the details. And that's the Rambam's pshat in Ma yichpes lo lekodesh Baruch Hu ben shoichet men hatzaref le shoichet men hatzav shoichet men haoiref. But the Mekabolim go into pirtei protim. Everything has to do with Shemis and with the Eses Sfiras. It's a totally different approach. Benkach u benkach, anything that is to the benefit of man overrides Tzaar Balei Chaim. But the Ramo does right, and I think the source is a Turmas Adeshen. Not excessive cruelty. And tearing out the big feathers of a bird is extremely painful, and it's not that important. So the Ramo says one should abstain from excessive cruelty. There's a halacha, Gemara and Brochas, brought in Shulchan Aruch. Before a person sits down to his meal, if he has animals, he needs to first feed the animals before he sits down to eat himself with his family. And that is also a manifestation of V'rachmav al kol ma'asav of Tzaar Balei Chaim. And it goes some Sofer Arshas above Metzia Lamed Beis, that some Sofer writes Tzaar Balei Chaim Dioraisa d'chsiv V'rachmav al kol ma'asav. But that's a posuk in Tehillim. Dioraisa needs to have a source in Toras Moshe. I think Pshat in the Chasam Sofer is Hadabeg b'midaisov, Haleich b'drachov, Ma'urachum afaturachum. Rachma v'al just proves that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares not only about people, not only about Yidden, about animals and Balei Chaim as well, but Rachma al kol ma'asav. And then it comes back to Hadabeg b'midaisov. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rachma v'al kol ma'asav, he expects the same from us. So according to all the different sources, Tzaar Balei Chaim is min haTorah, but it's Rotzoin Hashem. It's neither a mitzvah say nor a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. So what is the source? On our sheet we had three sources. According to the Ravid, lo yisachsim shor b'dishoy. According to Rashi, ozev ta'zavimoy. According to the Rambam, al mahe kisu esasoinchu ze sholosh ragolim. So benkach u benkach, Tzaar Balei Chaim Dioraisa, and a person should care not only about any other Yid, but even about animals. Rabbeinu HaKodesh, because HaKodesh Baruch Hu medaktek in Chasidov, kechut ha'sa'aro, Rabbeinu HaKodesh was punished because he seemed not to care enough for an animal that was going to Shlita, and it ran to Rabbeinu HaKodesh for protection. And when did his Yisurim leave him? When he expressed compassion, even for mice or rats. We don't know exactly what kind of vermin they were. So that is the madreges of tzaddikim that care for every living creature. B'darkam shel Chazal, Tzaar Balei Chaim Dioraisa. So in this week's parsha we learn about Bilam. Bilam had the diploma in Klolos. He was That was his specialty. He was the mumche for klolos. Questionable profession. Chose for himself, but from the entire world, people paid a lot of money to Bilam to come and curse their enemies. And Balak pays a lot of money for Bilam to come to be Makalal B'nai Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu mahapech klola lebracha. The Gemara in Brochas Daf Daled and Avodah Zorah Daf Zayin says, what was Bilam's specialty? He knew the rega kememre that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in wrath every day. Chazal say there was one rega kememre, a split second, or a fraction of a second, in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu koyes, Bilam was a Navi. He knew when that time is, and in that moment, if you give a curse, it's terrible. Tosfos asks, what could you say in a moment? What could you say in a second? Till you open your mouth, it's over. It's a fleeting moment. So how much curses could one put into a rega kememra? Tosfos said, he said one word, kaleim, destroy them. One word, nothing more. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes kaleim, and he turns around the letters. If you read it the other way, it's melech. And that is what the Pasuk says. Melech is kaleim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns kaleim into melech. And I ask, does HaKadosh Baruch Hu need to play around with letters? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to ignore Bilam's klolos, he just throws them out of the window. Well, what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's problem? He needs to play around with letters and turn kaleim into melech. What's the inyan? Libi yoimali. Ashrei is a very special perek in Tehillim. We say Ashrei a few times every day. And in this tefillah, Tehillah David, which we start with Ashrei Yosh Veveisecha, there are 3 psukim that deal with Malchus Shemayim. Do you remember which 3? Kvoid Malchus Shemayim Gvirosu Yidaberu, Lo Yidiyah Levnei Yolim Gvirosu V'chvoid Yidam Malchusai, Malchus Cho Malchus Kol Olamim U'Memshalto Cho V'chol Doi V'Doyo. Realize that these 3 psukim are Chof Lamed Mem, Oisi Es Kaleim. So the 3 letters, Kaleim and Ashrei, are the only 3 psukim that deal with Malchus Shemayim. Libi Yoimeli, Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Bilam, you're a prophet, but you're a stupid fool as well. Because if they go, so do you. If they go, everyone goes. If they go, the world goes. Because what's Tachlis Abriya? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create this world? And the side of Esas Firos, Olam Asiyah is Malchus. Olam Asiyah is the world we live in, the world we know, the world our senses recognize, and that is Malchus. A king could rule by force, but that's not a real kingship. A king wants to be appreciated by his subjects. He wants to be loved. So Kodesh Baruch Hu created this world. And this is the only world in which people have Bechira. Uvecharto b'chaim. And we are the ones that are Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yolamai. We are the only ones that Ashreinu ma'torif cholkeinu. Umiyachtem shemoy pamayim b'kol yoim ba'ahava. And we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And that is Tachlis Abriya, Malchus Shemayim. And we are the only ones that recognize Kodesh Baruch Hu as Melech HaOlam, and we are Miyachid Shemoy. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Bilam, you say Kaleim, so what's going to be with Malchus? Don't you realize if they go, everyone goes. There's no point. No Tachlis in the Bria. And that is Oimek HaSoid of Kaleim and Melech. If Kaleim, there is no Melech, there is no Malchus. There is no world. There's no point in this entire creation. And that is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns Kalem into Melech. And the three psukim in Ashrei dealing with Malchus Shamayim are Oisias, Kof, Lamed, Mem. Another important yesod in Siddur Agra, in Ashrei Avolotzion, on the Posek, Begvurois Yesha Yeminoi, the Gaon explains. There's an internal contradiction in this Posek. Gvurois is Midas Adin, and Yemin is Rachamim. Small Doiche Min Mekareves, Small is Din, Yemin is Rachamim. So what's the Posek? Begvurois Yesha Yeminoi. So the Gaon says, the biggest rachamim and the greatest rachamim are the rachamim that are yotzei midas adin. When din is nefach larachamim, that is the greatest midas rachamim, and that's the side of begurus yesheminoi, and that is why we say mechalkel chayim bechesed in beches agvuros. The second brocha in Shemoyne Esra is beches agvuros. Gvuros gishomim, gvuros is din. And that is where we say Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed. Because the greatest Rachamim, Yotzei Midas Adin. In Sichas Menchasosha Chelek Aleph, I wrote a big arichas about this. The Ramban in Parshas V'Zois HaBrocha, on the Posek Mi Yaminoi Eish Das Lomoi, the Ramban says the same. Yamin is Rachamim, Eish is Din. Eish is Din, Mayim is Rachamim. Miyaminoi eish das lomoi. The Ramban writes, this posuk has a soid godel, shemidas adin klula berachamim. And that is the soid of klolos shenefach lebrocha. Dafka the klolos of Bilam, which are the most horrific and terrible klolos ever. Kodesh Baruch Hu is mahapech klola lebrocha. Kodesh Baruch Hu he could disregard the klolos. Chaval. When the klol is nefech lebrocha and midas adin is mishpia rachamim, those are the rachamim gedolim. Liyosed Lovei, the Gemara says in Shabbos Peites, Kodesh Baruch Hu will turn to Avraham Avinu and tell him chotu bonecha, and Avraham will angrily respond, Yemochu al kedush hashimcha. Kodesh Baruch Hu will be disappointed. It's not what I expected you to say. Kodesh Baruch Hu will say, Avraham Avinu didn't know what's Tzaar Gidul Bonim. Let's turn to Yankov. Yankov knew what's Tzaar Gidul Bonim. Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Yankov, Chotu Benecho. Surprisingly, Yankov responds exactly the way Avraham did. Yamachu al Kedush Shimcha. And Kodesh Baruch Hu will say, Lo b'savet dami, v'lo b'darde ke'etza. Avraham is too old. Yankov is too young. Let's hear what Yitzchak has to say. Now, Avraham koloi chesed. Didn't chesed l'Avraham. Yankov is teferes, which is a combination of din and chesed. Pachad Yitzchak is koloi din. How does Yitzchak respond? Kodesh Baruch Hu tells him, Chotu bonecho. And he says, what did you say? Chotu bonai, they're my children. Aren't they your children? You are the one that said, B'yetzias Mitzrayim b'ni b'choyri Yisrael. So why do you turn to me and say, Chotu bonecho? They're not my children, they're your children. And then Yitzchak will say, let's make a cheshbon. Yemeshin is any shiv mishona. 50% of the time people sleep or are not in Beis HaKisa. So how much is left? 35. Till Ad Esrim Shono, B'chlal, Beis Shono Ma'al is not done. So what are we talking about? 25 years. Pal Galai Pal Galach. Pilei Plois. Avraham Chesed has nothing nice to say about us. Neither does Yankov Avinu. And Dafke Yitzchak is the one. He will be the Melitz Yosha. Yes. Because La'osed Lovei V'sof HaYomim. We will need such gewaldige chasodim. The Midas Adin will be so difficult. Only Yitzchak, only Din could be Mishpia, the Rachamim, that we will need in the end of days. And that will be Al Yedei Yitzchak Avinu. So, we are still in the midst of a very difficult tkufa for Klal Yisrael and Etzisur and the entire world. Yerotzen, we should see Midas Adin Nefach Larachamim, and Klolo is Nefach Lebrocho, and all the brochas of Bilim should be Neskayim, and we should Zoicha Bekorav Biyomenu to a Yeshua Seilomim, and to see Bias Moshiach Tzedkenu, B'mheira Biyomenu Amen. Hope to see you all on Chodesh Elul, and Shenizke Tamid Lahagul Torah Uladira.